Welcome to CRM Stories with me, Jerome Clapworthy. CRM Stories is a podcast where we talk with Salesforce professionals from all over the world about their careers and favorite Salesforce case studies. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Ascher from Acoustic Selling. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So where in the world are you sitting, Kevin, as we have this conversation?
As I glance away from the screen, I am looking at Lake Tahoe in California.
Oh, beautiful. Fantastic part of the world. And have you always lived there or somewhere you've moved to later in life?
Second time around being here, I grew up in New York, made my way to the Bay Area, Seattle, and then returned here to Tahoe about 6 years ago.
Oh, fantastic. Sounds beautiful. All right. And Kevin, how did you get started in Salesforce? What was your introduction to the ecosystem?
Well, it sort of started in college. I was an engineering student, and when I found my way into sales, I ended up being a very process-oriented salesperson, as opposed to more of a relationship-oriented salesperson. So it was pretty natural to me when I was at a startup in the year 2000 and this new product called Salesforce came around. I was a sole rep, and Salesforce automation was the new rage, and I really took to the product because even though I was a team of one, it really helped me keep myself organized. And it's pretty funny thinking back then it replaced products known as Act or Goldmine or things that the vast majority of your users or your listeners are probably too young to know.
Right.
But I became familiar with Salesforce very early in its history. 20 years of ad sales, for a variety of reasons, was ready to move on. And always was intrigued by the technology. So over time, I became more and more technical, dove in more into the Salesforce platform, and realized that was the best way that I could help sellers, more so than being a coach or a trainer, working behind the scenes on implementing the technology that helps them sell.
So engineering student, career in sales, which then morphed into being a technician of the Salesforce platform.
Yes, and as I've gotten more technical, I found that people coming originally as Salesforce users and salespeople is relatively rare. As you go up the technical ladder, there's a lot of developers and people from a tech background. But people coming from a sales and business background starts to thin out a bit.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Okay. Cool. And so how would you best describe your sort of current role?
As a combination admin and architect, and a term that I see more often, an admin developer, the ability to write some light code and use some of the AI tools to generate relatively simple classes and triggers before needing to hand it off to somebody even more technical.
Yeah, sure. And are you sort of managing a team or doing most of your work yourself? What does your sort of structure look like?
At my firm, Acoustic Selling, we have two who are full-time, and we flex up as needed with a reliable bench. So it's a small but mighty team. So we do most of it is our own direct handiwork of how we serve customers.
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, on this show, we love to talk about, real Salesforce examples and some case studies. So specifically, a potential example where you've seen Salesforce that's really just transformed a business in terms of profitability, or it could be some sort of other efficiency sort of measure. And then maybe a scenario where you've seen Salesforce that's just been a really interesting and sort of weird and wonderful use case, which people may not expect. And then also an example of a project that perhaps didn't go so well, why you think that was, and lessons learned, and then maybe what you do differently from there. Does that sound all right if we work through those?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So firstly, what is an example of something where you've seen Salesforce just absolutely, blow a business out of the water in terms of the impact that it's had?
So a few years ago, we started working with a company called SmartBiz, which focuses on, here in the U.S., the Small Business Association is a government agency that provides low interest rate loans to small businesses. So they provide those types of loans and similar types of financing options dedicated towards small businesses. And at the time, they had their own legacy CRM. It was a pretty flexible system.
Okay.
It was doing the job for a period of time, but it was managed by the engineering team, the same
Okay.
team that builds the core product. They'd always said, hey, at some point, we'll move to a product like Salesforce at some point.
And so just to pause there, so is this to manage their sort of the whole loans process and people that are inquiring about potentially getting a loan from them, or is it different sort of
So
aspects?
their own product. So when you go to the website and apply for a loan, all of the processing of that loan was their own product
Yep.
that they built themselves.
Okay.
But they were using a legacy CRM for any of the actual customer information and any of the customer facing communications. And the systems spoke sort of.
Yeah.
And so they recognized they needed to move to a more purpose-built system, but it was always off in the future. But that future came as a result of the coronavirus.
Oh, really?
And again, here in the U.S., there was a big sweeping law that brought the Paycheck Protection Program. Small businesses were able to get low interest or fully forgiven government loans and grants to keep them afloat. So all of a sudden, Smart Biz saw a huge wave was about to hit their shores of increased loan applications. So the sometime in the future turned out to be
today,
6 weeks from now.
Yeah, wow.
So a lot of work done, a lot of just accelerating. This was one of those examples where we brought in a flex team,
Sure.
Lots of discovery, diligence, technical, business, and otherwise. And just to get, skip to the good part of the chapter, we got this system up and running where the main things, it needed to be easy to use because this was the first CRM for many of the employees.
Right.
It needed to connect to their existing system. Mm-hmm. And in particular, it really needed to handle loans as in opportunity ownership, opportunity assignments. Salesforce has lots of purpose built out of the box for lead assignments and lead queues, but that same level of functionality doesn't exist for opportunities.
Okay.
So we needed to build that in a way that would be easy to use, easy to maintain, particularly easy to change.
Okay.
Because business rules and capacity were changing sometimes multiple times a day.
So the people were still coming lead, then opportunity, but it was more how those opportunities were being sort of diverted and processed where it was a bit more bespoke. Is that right?
Yes, because for them, the lead or the loan application was modeled as an opportunity in Salesforce.
Yep.
And as you think of it like an assembly line, as it moves stage by stage through the application process, there are other people at the company that need to start to touch that loan application.
So
auditors,
the whole process,
checking financial documents, and a whole bunch of sort of things. So it's not the typical B2B sale where you have a rep who owns the op from start to finish. Based on different rules, it starts to switch ownership, switch hands.
Yeah, sure.
And
did you sync that up with the opportunity stages, or you took a different approach in terms of a lot of those decisions?
It was the opportunity stages was the big bucket, but then there were a bunch of criteria, particularly that got called in from their loan application system.
Okay.
That would then either update the stage or update sort of the sub requirement within the stage, and at times then change ownership as it, let's say, went from origination to more underwriting and final decision.
Okay. So opportunity was end-to-end, loan application, loan approved essentially, or it was like
exactly.
It was kind of so the whole process was managed with the opportunity. Yeah, right.
Yes, and the opportunity teams weren't really meeting the requirements. So in the end, just a bunch of user lookup fields on the opportunity.
Okay.
Change criteria-based visibility and approval workflows. So that was all just the configuration, the products itself, layered on training and enablement, getting all the players and actors using this system, and needing to have complete confidence because this was a high-stress environment of all of a sudden hundreds of loans per employee per day. to
Really?
start processing. It
Yeah,
needed
wow.
to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Luckily, it did.
And is that same sort of system still in place to your knowledge and working well? Or did they sort of scale back after that sort of process came to an end? Is that...
Well, yes. Ultimately it is still in place. Once the surge of activity, there was a chance to finally reassess because we built things very quickly,
Yeah, right.
and a lot of it was done in flow.
Yep.
And so I know since then they hired an in-house architect
Okay.
who did a bunch to refactor, consolidate flows, replace a few with triggers and classes.
Yep.
But ultimately, the original framework still exists to
Yeah,
this
fantastic.
day. And ultimately, we we built a system that was able to handle a 500 time increase in loan volume and a
Yeah,
7x increase in revenue. So this was
man.
just a seismic shift in the history of that
Yeah,
company, and we had to do it pretty quickly.
that's amazing. Wow. And so were they sort of on your radar? Were you guys in talks before this, or it was like, hey, we need someone. Hi, Kevin. Let's use you. Boom. 6 weeks later, there was a soft. Or was there already sort of a relationship there of sorts prior to sort of day one, or it was
There
where they
was
were
a
looking for someone, you
relationship
got the job,
prior.
and then you raced out of the gates?
Yes, because although we focus and most of our work is with Salesforce, there are adjacent platforms that we use and manage and coach on.
Hmm.
For this company in particular, they were using Outreach, the
Okay.
sales prospecting product, along with Gong.
Okay.
So a lot of our work with them was started off with the coaching and or not the individual coaching, but executive coaching
Okay.
and consulting on building the right types of sales processes and
Okay.
systems on their legacy CRM. So we already did have an existing relationship. So when it was time to go, I remember it very well, getting the call on a Saturday. Kevin, we
What are you
need
doing
you.
tonight? Yeah,
Pretty
right.
much.
And I guess having that prior involvement and understanding their system, I guess, given you're, I guess, involved in the co-design, must have made that discovery process a lot easier. That you weren't learning them and their business from the ground up. You already had some sort of concept of what they do, instead
Exactly.
of, okay, so tell me about loans and starting from
That's
scratch.
right. That's right. And one of the things that I wanted to point out here, which I'll point out in one of the other case studies,
Mm,
the biggest individual person factor of success was having a solid sales operations lead on
yeah. Okay.
their end.
Yep.
Because there's so much work and stakeholder interviews, input,
Hmm.
understanding the intricacies of their business process. For us as outside consultants to get up to that level of knowledge would have slowed us down, and probably we still would have never gotten there.
Yeah.
So
Right.
having a complete partner on the inside who was able to accelerate their end of the handshake
Yeah.
was instrumental in getting the speed and the accuracy that we did.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And in terms of, I guess, from a product point of view, was it pretty vanilla in terms of, core platform plus Sales Cloud, or was there a few other sort of nuts and bolts that were sort of added to the
It
mix?
was plain vanilla. It was Sales Cloud.
Yeah, cool.
Again, after this rush, we did end up including what was then high velocity sales, now
Okay.
sales engagement.
Okay.
So we did, in that case, bring that functionality onto the platform from Outreach. But overall, the solution was, it was connected apps, flows, and just a few classes and triggers. But almost all of it was done declaratively.
And in those cases where it's such a fast-paced situation, I mean, my perspective is, if you can get a flow to do the job and to do it well, that's a great way to get it up and running. And there you can bring in a developer after the fact, and they can optimize things and decrease the database calls and stuff like that. But it can be such a powerful tool to get things off the ground and get the show on the road, so to speak. And then
It,
you can always do that
exactly.
at a later date and convert it to Apex if that's better off. But they're so
Yeah,
powerful now that it's such a great tool to sort of use for that purpose.
definitely, definitely. Now, I would have built those flows a little differently, given the experience since then. I would
Yeah,
have
sure.
built them more modularly.
Okay.
I
So
would have
so separate flows that sort of call on each other and come back together,
exactly,
sort of thing. Yeah.
exactly. Just like how in an Apex trigger you want to separate the logic from the trigger, I would
Yeah.
have
Okay.
done that more
Okay.
within the
Is it
flows.
is that just as your sort of flow expertise grew in time, or just as you
Exactly.
understood the business better towards the end of it or something?
Exactly. I like to, part of the part of why I like this field, and I'm sure why you and your listeners like it. There's always something new. There is always a way to grow. So,
Mm.
kind of by definition, I like to joke to my customers in particularly Smart Biz. They have the 2020 version of me.
Yeah, right.
The 2024 version of me is even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
Yeah.
25 version, I can't wait to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and as the tool grows, like, next week they could release a feature which would change the way you would build every flow you've ever built up to today, isn't it? Like, but
Ooh, stay tuned to the third case study, Jerome.
all right, can't wait. Well, that was cool. Anything else you want to drop on that one? I think that's a pretty good coverage before we move on
Yeah,
to case
I
study
feel
number
good.
two.
So thank you, SmartBiz, for trusting us with
Yeah.
a bet the company move, and it paid off.
And so what
And
was got that phone call on the Saturday through to users started using it in production? What sort of time frame was that? About 6 weeks that you mentioned that it
that
was
was
sort
6 weeks.
of. Wow.
Now again, a brilliant move from my counterpart, from Bobby, the sales operations head. He put together trailheads and requirements, and you weren't allowed into the system until you completed and got badges.
Okay. Yeah, right. That's a good idea. And I guess the trailheads and stuff's a lot more applicable when it is a vanilla sort of Sales Cloud implementation, whereas
Yes.
when it's something a bit more custom and the objects aren't the same sort of terminology that's all throughout Trailhead, it can be a bit more tricky. But yeah, in those
Yep.
cases, that Trailhead's perfect for that, isn't it? All right, so can we move on to case study number two, which would be an example of a really interesting, potentially a weird and wonderful use of Salesforce that people may not have expected, or just something that was really interesting to you on a more personal level for some reason?
Well, the company that comes to mind with this, they're now known as Active Learning. At the time, they had a
Okay.
different name. But what Active does is it's a student, it's a learning platform, a student engagement platform for STEM,
Okay.
science, technology, engineering, math, mostly at the university level. So it's a software platform that helps students and the professors engage and get the most out of the course. It supplements the in-person learning.
Okay. So not content delivery, more student engagement sort of around. Is
Right.
it in-person thing or an online thing or?
It's an online thing. So
Okay.
a simple way to think of it would be an LMS, a learning management
Okay.
system, but geared towards university students in the sciences, in
Okay.
math, in STEM subjects.
Mhm.
And why I chose this is because it's the first time in my career has all been B2B, business to
Yep.
business.
Hmm.
This is the first time in my whole career when the business model was they don't sell to people,
Yeah.
meaning
Okay.
usually so used to there's an account and we
Mm.
identify people at the account, their contacts. Maybe they
Yep.
start as leads, we
Hmm.
convert. But ultimately, we end up with an opportunity. The opportunity is with an account, and there are contacts, and we work the deal to closure.
Hmm.
And the details will differ, but that's the overall structure.
Yep.
Well, it took me a while to understand that with their model, they don't, I mean, yes, I mean, literally there are people who have to approve, but the entity that they're selling to, it's not the university because there are departments within the universities.
Yep.
And uh, so they sell to a course.
Okay.
Chem 101 may or may not be offered this next semester
Okay.
at university A, B, C, or D. So there's a course needs to be offered, and
Okay.
that course then may have one or multiple professors involved in making the learning. So in the end, a complex
Mm.
business structure of how they identify opportunities and how they chase after these opportunities. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's that opportunities get attached to a course being offered, which just ended up being a harder data model to originally get
Yeah.
my head around, let
Yeah.
alone have salespeople understand and build in the necessary automations of how do I identify my best opportunities this next academic year.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So the company had their LMS platform that was separate, so this was still just for the sales. So it was just a really unique sort of sales, I guess, concept in terms of that was selling to a course instead of a okay.
Yeah, so ultimately they're selling a SaaS product like
Yep.
most other SaaS products. It comes with subscriptions and
Yeah.
per user pricing and that thing. But
Yep.
instead of just, oh, I have an account and I go after the account, it's just there's something in between because there's
Yeah.
universities and there's university systems and there's university departments.
Yeah.
So both who's on our how we model our addressable universe and the relationships between them and how
Yeah.
we actually identify here is an in-market opportunity for this next semester, because if I'm at University of California and they're not offering Chem 101 next semester, I don't have an opportunity there.
Yeah. Right. So it was still was an account contact sort of setup, or you had to go to personal accounts, or what? Was it
We,
still?
we still used the business accounts, but
Yeah.
we ended up creating a new custom object that we referred to as a course decision unit. And
Okay.
the detail of that doesn't matter as much
Yeah.
as it was a junction object to basically connect accounts and contacts and courses
Hmm.
and departments to ultimately just help the active sellers
Yeah.
make sense and understand, hey, in this next semester, I have 250 potential opportunities. That's my universe.
So
And so
every
now I
every
know
university that's running course ABC, where we've
that's
got
right.
some stuff to support that, that's who we want to be able to find and try and contact.
Yep.
So, yeah. Right.
So there was a data modeling, was the core challenge, intellectual challenge to this.
Hmm.
As well, they were using Pardot and Outreach. So there
Hmm.
were synchronization issues between their marketing automation platform, their
Hmm.
selling engagement platforms, high in the field use travel from their reps. So there's a mobile component. So there's just a lot of stuff to dive into and
Yep.
untangle. And again, common theme: highly engaged, highly motivated, highly skilled customer counterpart.
Yep.
So roll up sleeves and just get dirty with this.
Yeah. Right. So they had a pretty clear idea of who the customer was. That you were just sort of providing the technology solution to make that easier to manage and track, or that was part of your solution was how to
Well,
identify the right person to try and call and get them in the system for you.
it was a new head of sales and customer success,
Hmm.
and she basically could draw things out and had a pretty clear understanding of just how the sales motion should work.
Hmm.
And then I was able to take that and basically transform that into the actual technical requirements of, okay,
Yeah.
great. Now, how do we arm wrestle and reconfigure Salesforce to meet those unique business requirements that I had never
Yeah.
come
Right.
across?
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. And again, from a product point of view, just the basic products of standard plus Sales Cloud, or you had to bring in something a bit creative, or
Pardot, now known as
yep.
account engagement,
Yep.
and then also third-party products
Yep.
such as Outreach
Yeah. Sure.
being part of it. As the program went on, we did use a third-party connector
Okay.
called Synatic, because at some point it became clear that part of the sales and service, we needed to have data from their first-party platform. We needed
Okay.
to start having, our
Like
students
the LMS
logging
side of
in,
things. Yeah. Okay. So
you
to
know,
be able to have some
and
metrics
that
around
first party
usage.
usage.
Yeah.
So we did end up using a third party connector
Okay.
to simplify the API connections and
Okay.
basically have that middleware to
Yeah. Sure.
start bringing their first party data into Salesforce and into account engagement and outreach.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, that's anything other details there. I think that covers it pretty well. But any other details you think are pertinent to mention while we're on that one?
I think the one other is that account hierarchies can get pretty tricky, and this will come up
Mm,
in another. This might come up in another example,
yeah.
but often the Salesforce account hierarchy out of the box, it's pretty basic. meaning
Yep.
there's just one field, there's one way to visualize it.
Yep.
And the only way to easily handle something through the UI is you have to go to the child account and
Yep.
then put in the parent. Now,
Yep.
of course, when you start building flows and lightning components and and customization, you could get around, but out of the box, it's
Yeah.
relatively light.
Yep.
And account hierarchies can really come down to the business modeling. Because again, in universities, well, here in the US, you have the University of California.
Yep.
Well, I think there are 11 or 12 campuses. I forget how many.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
University of California,
Yeah.
Berkeley, University of California,
Yeah.
Los Angeles, University of California, Davis. Well,
Yeah.
within them, you have departments, the chemistry department, the math
Yeah.
department. And, and depending on how you want to link, and ultimately, through custom components, you can build anything.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's trying to figure out what do I really need? What are the reports? What KPIs and business decisions or modeling am I trying to do? Because often what we
Mm.
find is that the customer doesn't often know how to ask for it. They just say, well, in the real world, here's the
Yeah.
hierarchy, so we should have that in Salesforce. And
Yeah.
it may or may not need to be replicated in Salesforce. So my summarized point to the audience is just because we can build something in Salesforce doesn't always mean that we should.
Should.
And being
Yeah.
really clear on what does it take to manage the business, measure
Yeah.
our success, it's always a balance. It's always a balance.
Yeah, because there's the technical skill, you can build anything you want, and then there's the wisdom that comes in from, taking those requirements and transforming that to the best structure on the other end, which
And
yeah.
there are app exchange solutions that focus specifically on account hierarchy.
Yeah, sure.
And that's something that I wouldn't have predicted is as big of an issue as frequently as it is. So
Okay.
the universities, okay, if you're dealing with multinationals,
Yeah, gosh, of course.
we've done work in the automotive dealers. So again, you have automotive groups. The same ownership group may own a Honda dealer and a Toyota dealer.
Brands,
Um,
countries,
it
and it
comes
can
up.
proliferate on so many different levels, can't
That's
it?
right.
Geographically, brand-wise, location-wise, model. Like, yeah, gosh.
So sometimes it could get pretty. We had a pretty gnarly implementation around account hierarchies for a company that sold technology to fast food restaurants, known as quick service restaurants,
Okay.
QSRs.
Yeah.
Well, you have a conglomerate known as Yum Brands that might own Taco Bell and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then you have regions and franchise. So it can get really gnarly. So
Yeah.
it's really important to understand how does the business look and categorize these different types
Mm.
of units.
Is there a question, or I guess a type of questioning that you do that helps you go from we could do anything to this is probably the best way to do it that was in Salesforce, or is it just
Well, usually what
Discovery
jumpstarts
101?
where we jumpstart the conversation, we work a lot with private venture funded startups.
Mm-hmm.
They have investors, so they have
Mm-hmm.
board meetings. So we start with what's the reporting and what are the expectations for your investors
Okay.
that you're reporting each month or quarter. If it's a
Yeah.
public company, we have at times dealt with smaller public companies.
Sure.
So again, they're very clear on what types of reporting. But usually we start with, it should sound as obvious as it is. What's the current status quo? How do you currently make your business decisions and hold
Mm-hmm.
yourselves accountable?
Yeah.
And from there, it's a pretty quick jump to the gap analysis. Okay, so here are the reports or the analytics or the ways that you make decision. What's your confidence that these numbers are accurate and representative? That usually gets you some level of certainty. And then what's missing? If you could have something else, what would that be? And that's ultimately the level of questioning that gets to our current state and our gap analysis and gives us direction.
And do you find in most cases that they're sort of ready for that process, or sometimes you say, hey, I think you guys need to go away and figure that out first and then come back to us, or that can be part of your services to, all right, well,
Yeah.
if you're not quite there yet, let's put it all on the table and let's think about KPIs, let's think about metrics. Or
that's a great lead into the projects that don't go well.
All
So
right,
I'll
perfect.
blend
Yeah,
the
we
two.
can transition. Yeah, let's talk about something which
So
maybe hasn't gone well and why.
the ones that do go well, they are ready for those conversations. Either they already have had them
Yep,
and they could pretty much just read me in and bring us up to speed,
yep,
or if they haven't, they're open to it and they
yep,
recognize that having an outsider facilitate and look at things with different experiences and frameworks is of value to them.
yep.
That's the growth open-minded mindset.
Hmm.
When projects don't go well, what we found that a common theme is either a lack of interest, accessibility, just a variety of obstacles to being able to have those foundational discussions.
Do you think is
Lack
that
of
they already think they know, or they just don't understand the important? They're just not aware of it as something that's important, or they think they've solved that and they just want you to build the system. We know what we want, build it. Or
it, it, it often comes up as the last. We already know what we want.
yeah, we've done that. We've done that already internally, in house. We're good.
Or no, we have it can be that. It could also be we haven't built it, but we know it's simple. The age old, it's just a checkbox. All we need is a checkbox. So and why do you need to talk to our SVP? This is a technical implementation. Why do
Yeah,
you're not going to get their time? They're too busy with other stuff. Those are often the ways that it gets, why are you asking those questions? And I'm being a little facetious and a little
yeah,
cheeky
absolutely.
here. Just shut up and code. Just
Yeah,
build what we told you to build and let us
yeah,
know when it's done. So
yeah,
the first two examples I was giving, total hand in hand, high trust partnership.
yep,
Nobody was above the other. We all got dirty.
yeah.
We all zoomed in, zoomed out as needed. The
Respected each other's
ones,
expertise, understood the value of those conversations.
yep, the ones where we in retrospect, saw red flags that we didn't, or either we didn't see them at the time or we chose to ignore them. Were you know we felt and succumbed to the timing pressure to where we
Yeah,
skip steps in discovery and
yeah,
analysis because we got caught up in the excitement of rushing to build.
yeah.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of slow it down, slow
Mm,
down to go faster,
yeah,
and
right.
the measure twice, cut once, choose your cliche.
Yeah,
It always works. So for instance, we were this was a project for a company that has their own version of AI analysis of call recordings. Basically, you can think of it
okay,
as a competitive offering to Gong or
okay,
Einstein Conversation
okay.
Insights.
Yep,
And they record their sales calls using
hmm,
Zoom.
yep,
And they wanted us to build a connection where we would fetch the recording from Zoom,
hmm,
submit it through their API to their platform, wait for it to be processed, and then push those changes back into Salesforce. Basically, some numerical scores and some
yep.
categorizations and some things like that.
Sentiment analysis, stuff like that. Yep.
So in rushing through technical due diligence and business requirement analysis, we missed that at the time their API required client credential authentication, which really
Okay,
just means that it's a one-time connection with a very long username and password.
okay.
And the out-of-the-box capabilities until the winter release, which wasn't available then,
Oh, really?
that wasn't an that sounds straightforward, but it was not an out-of-the-box Salesforce capability.
Ah,
So it
okay,
required a bunch of additional coding and workarounds. And when you're doing your own authentication in Salesforce, it's timely. Salesforce
okay.
does a lot of amazing out of the box things like
Yeah,
keeping securely and encryptically storing credentials, access tokens, refresh tokens, like all this complex stuff
okay.
that even for developers, they don't have to worry about.
Yeah,
Developers
right.
will set this stuff up declaratively so they could just write their classes in code and
Yeah,
not
right.
have to
Okay,
write all the complex logic for making callouts and all this stuff.
okay. Yeah,
But this one type And it was a very common way. What the company built was very industry standard.
Okay.
But at the time, it wasn't Salesforce supported.
Okay.
And we hadn't gone through enough. We were already in the build
Yeah.
when we had that OG's moment. And that
So
was uncomfortable.
the overall concept of Salesforce, send it out, do its thing, come back. So that was fine. There was no surprises there. It was just a technical aspect which came and jumped up in front of you when you weren't ready for it. So it wasn't a
Yeah, and
core
it was
business.
specifically, it was a technical aspect for their system to recognize, okay, you're Salesforce, who's asking, you're safe. Come
Yeah.
on in.
Yeah, sure.
And we would have, if we had just spent a bit more time with diligence and assessment before already, because nobody wants surprises, and we didn't recognize that that was a potential hurdle. If you're doing a kitchen remodel,
Yep.
a good contractor will give you an estimate, and they'll also tell you, look, there is a chance you have lead pipes. Your house is this many years old.
When we pull that cupboard away, we don't know what's going to be behind it before we put the new one in.
Yeah, like there are known unknowns. There's a relatively finite amount of things that could come up. If you go in to get your engine serviced at a car dealer, you're going to have it's a finite list of things that could be wrong with your engine.
Yep.
I mean, it's not going to be that an asteroid, a meteor shower, got jammed in the tranny. Like, it's just going to be, so we missed our role as consultants of giving a thorough assessment of, hey, here are the things that we need to look for during assessment. Just like a doctor, we're going to take some images. And so if you go into surgery, they know what they're getting into. And there are also, hey, there are some things that we may not know until we're in there.
Yeah.
But again, we're telling you ahead of time, these are those kinds of things. And that was on us. And ultimately, what I would say as the learning experience for everybody is that when trust and or clarity go down in an engagement, the need for documentation and adherence to a process has to go up.
Yeah, okay.
Getting business and technical requirements written and approved. And if we go forward and find that they're different from what was, defined and approved, it's a change order, and calling that out, it is different. And again, when you're in a high trust environment, you can go faster and ease off on some of those things. But if you're in low trust, high unknown, you gotta stick to the documentation and the process, or else you as the consultant or the implementer will shoulder an unfair amount of the risk.
So on your end, is that like a two-pronged, another reinforcement that got to make sure you do your due diligence? And then secondly, if there's another API, we're going to really drill down on those details before we write that up and start work. Is that the kind of a technical learning as well as a general learning of make sure we don't forget it? It always comes back to bite us, as well as, all right, there's another API, we're going to really map that out before we put pen to paper, and start
and to
typing.
get paid for that.
Yeah.
And to get paid for that, because what I've also learned is we'll answer questions in a general nature.
Sure.
But the moment it starts coming to looking at your specific situation and, assessing and diagnosing, like you have to pay a lot to get an MRI, to get an X-ray.
Yeah.
It still doesn't fix.
It's the same thing.
We come and analyze your broken arm, but it's still necessary.
That is a really good analogy, isn't it? MRI.
Expertise, that's a paid deliverable.
Yeah, because they can use the same knowledge if they go with someone else. The work you do.
That's right.
If you get the job or they want to go with someone else in the end, that's still, they can take that document and the work you do and someone else can benefit from that same learning.
That's right. So then often it'll be like, okay, well, how much does it cost?
Yeah.
And so we're getting better. So, well, the cost goes down. Again, the more, it all depends. How much are you going to make yourself available?
Yeah, right.
If you have a rock star sales ops person or a customer point of contact who can consolidate, facilitate stakeholder interviews, questionnaires, surveys, already have existing documentations, cost and time will go down. If we're coming into a new dynamic, chaotic environment, cost will go up. But those are necessary ingredients. to give you a realistic, accurate assessment of what needs to be done to meet these business requirements.
Yeah. So in that case study you referred to, do you think was it you guys probably raced ahead because you just got so into the work, or you sort of tried to, but then you got a bit of pushback, so you sort of went with it? Do you sort of say your intentions were there and you sort of went through that motion and there was too much resistance, so you just went, all right, let's just get into it? Or it was you kind of probably got carried away yourselves and it wasn't so much resistance on the other side?
It was probably a combo of all those, but specifically in this case, we had been working with the company with the revenue ops team for months.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
these were previous clients from previous organizations. So the individuals that we were working with, extremely high trust
yep,
relationship. We could
yep,
finish each other's sentences,
yeah,
and
sure.
things just went really well. They
Hmm.
introduced us into a new department within the organization,
Yeah, okay.
and we made assumptions. We just
Yeah,
made assumptions based on past
yeah,
experience, and in retrospect, we should have recognized those were full. Those just we shouldn't have made those assumptions.
yeah.
A new business unit, even though it was same
Same
company,
company.
we should have treated it like a brand new client,
Yeah,
and gone in. Not that I want to say not try, but gone in with the approach where we start at a high level of documentation and process.
yeah,
It's better to start there and ease up, because the other
yeah,
way was the
yeah.
trap
That's
that we fell
right.
into.
Yeah. No, that's a real learning, and yeah, it comes up again and again when you don't do the work up front.
And
It can,
yes, I personally did get swept up in the excitement of,
yeah,
oh, integration, and
yeah,
this is a
sweet,
great use case, and
yeah,
let's just, let's start banging this out. And
yeah,
like,
let's do it.
oops.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's something you have to learn periodically because you get reminded, then you go back and you get real disciplined, and then things go well for a while, and you can relax again. And every now and then you just need that little
So I
reminder
would
that,
say,
oh, that's right.
yeah. So I would say if there are any customer, Salesforce end user organizations listening right now,
Yeah,
not, Salesforce consultants and implementers, I would
yeah,
say as you're evaluating and interviewing potential partners, you
mhm,
should ask about lessons learned and projects that went south. Because
yeah,
if they don't have any, either they're not being truthful, the rep you're talking to is unaware, or
yeah,
they haven't done anything interesting yet,
yeah.
or they
Or it was
haven't
so
been
bad the
around long
client didn't
enough.
even tell them. The client just went, let's just walk away. They didn't even tell them that it was a disaster. It was so terrible.
That's right.
Yeah, either way. Oh man, well
Because
that was
back to
so fascinating.
the Kevin of 2024, if we're all not learning, and
Yeah,
unfortunately, part of learning will come from learning
yeah.
from mistakes.
Yeah, and we need to make sure that there's a culture of mistakes are okay. Obviously, we don't want them to have a negative impact, but yeah, I'm gonna make some judgment errors, and that's all right. We're living and we're learning. Fantastic.
We did get
Any
the
other?
job done, by the way. It was
Yeah,
bumpy, but we did
got
get
there.
everything connected, and we delivered a technically viable and valid product.
Yeah, okay. And then you're saying as of the next release, that would have been a whole lot easier. Is that correct? Based on new
It would,
functionality that's coming out.
yes, because now what we had to build is now an out of the box capability using external credentials.
Yeah, right. Fantastic. Oh, how cool is that? Brilliant. Well, that was so fascinating, especially that last one. They all were. That's really good. Any other technical details you thought would be interesting to drop there, or you think that's a pretty good coverage before we move on?
I think that's the other thing for the tech folks in the audience. Another thing that's not out of the box with Salesforce is setting up a webhooks listener.
Okay.
So these are things where we're using Salesforce sites. Go to the go to Setup UI and type in
Yeah.
sites and see what
Sites.
comes up about Salesforce sites.
Okay.
I'm going to guess that the vast majority of your, because this was, I think, like an older technology, you could set up a visual
Yeah.
force page and things like
Yeah.
this. But
I'm
webhooks
doing that.
is a common web standard now where it's
Yeah.
basically you're subscribing to an external system and you just want to know when a change happens.
Yeah.
So in our case, we just wanted to know that that Zoom finished processing a call and the recording and the transcript was available.
Yeah.
And instead of constantly calling and polling, we could just say, "Hey, we're instead of us calling you,
You let
you
us
just
know when you're
call
ready.
us."
Yeah, you tell us and then we'll do our thing. Yeah, right. Okay. Fascinating. I'm going to look up sites after this. Appreciate it. All right. As we sort of get towards the end, I just want to geek out a little bit, just ask some random sort of technical questions.
All right.
iPhone or Android? Where do you sit?
So I'm an Android user, and I think we need a new. We need to see that face says it all. People can be, we have protected class on gender, sexual orientation, age, national
Yeah.
origin, and we need a new protected class for
Android
technology
users,
selections.
discrimination laws.
Yeah, discrimination based on my phone.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's
We're
hilarious.
so tribal.
And Mac or PC? Guessing PC then if you're on Android already.
Let's just do it. PC.
Uh,
We use Outlook, not G Suite.
yeah, okay. Do you find that's more common, like the Microsoft in the corporate world? Is Microsoft dominating, or is G Suite still flying the flag pretty strong?
In the vast majority of the startup world, that the coastal elite companies that we tend
Yeah,
to deal with,
yeah.
it's it's uh, it's G Suite on a Mac. But when you get
Really?
into corporate America and bigger companies, it's PCs and Microsoft Suite.
Why are they G Suite? Is that better sales from Google side, or just culture? Just everyone's just used to
I
Google.
think
What's
it's a
wrong?
bit culture and probably simpler and lower cost is my
Yeah,
guess.
okay. Yeah, sure. Cool, cool.
Um, as hard as the Salesforce language can be sometimes, when I have to get into the admin side of our Microsoft 365 account, or
Mm,
we're going to do files connect within Salesforce to our SharePoint server.
mm.
Anybody who thinks Salesforce jargon and nomenclature is complicated,
Hasn't been in the
you ain't
back end
seen
of.
nothing compared to Microsoft.
Oh, good. And what do you guys? What's your tech stack internally for, I guess, communication and sort of project management? What do you guys spend your time in?
I'm glad you asked that. For project management, we were using Jira.
Okay.
Wasn't suiting our needs because it wasn't good for project management, so we built our own. So
All right.
we use cases. We bought a time tracking app off the App Exchange,
Okay. So you've got
and
your own Salesforce org to sort of basically
we're in
manage your own stuff.
Salesforce all the time. Our customer,
Yeah. Right.
because we feel like if we don't eat our own dog food, then what are we
It's
doing?
interesting, isn't
So
it? Yeah. Makes
here's
sense.
our
Yeah.
tech stack:
Yeah.
Pardot account engagement.
Yeah.
We use Experience Cloud for our customer portal where they can
Okay.
log in, track
Yeah.
and
Perfect.
submit cases, get reports that they need, that sort of thing.
Yep.
We use for our prospecting automation, we use sales engagement. We
Yeah.
use
Right.
Einstein Conversation
Okay.
Intelligence, and we
So
use
you are practicing what you
Einstein,
preach.
yeah,
Yeah.
Einstein Analytics, and we're on Unlimited Edition. I mean, we're just
Really?
all in.
Yeah. Nice. And with Pardot specifically, do you find you're using the full sort of products there, not just a glorified sort of autoresponder like a lot of people end up with it? Is it you?
We are in the early stages of using it because
Mhm.
we've spent a lot of time upping our content generation
Okay.
game. So, for instance, Jeremy, when this podcast airs, we will use Pardot to
Absolutely.
promote it.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And now
Cool. Cool.
we chose to build landing pages within our website because
Yep.
the landing page capabilities within Pardot just not quite what we want for matching the look and feel of our website. But as
Yeah.
far
Sure.
as Engagement Studio, all
Yep.
in.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
Oh, cool. Fantastic. And if you were CEO of Salesforce for the day, is there something that comes to mind that you would change, or you got to make a decision? Is there like a
yeah.
feature or a bug request? What comes to mind?
As much as I love Salesforce, what has always driven me crazy is that I think their sales and support leave a lot to be desired.
Okay.
So here's my specific recommendations, Mark. Having your all employees reach Ranger status is a great start. Every
Okay.
customer facing person at Salesforce should be Sales and Service Cloud and admin certified. Just
Okay.
done. They
Yeah.
have
Right.
to know the product. There have been so many instances where mine and my customers' time was wasted and frustration grew from asking basic questions of your sales team with the response being, I don't know, it's too technical of a question. Shouldn't be. Shouldn't be
Oh,
like that.
really?
Your sales team needs to know the product.
Okay.
And then on the support side, um, maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's a coaching thing. I know you outsource your support to Cognizant.
Okay.
Your support people need to act more like people and listen and not read scripts. I
Yeah.
could
Okay.
hear them thinking and reading through a script, as I'm trying to explain an issue instead of following and jamming me down
Yeah.
a list of questions, as opposed to actually just listening to what the issue is. The amount of times
Yeah.
where I've had to repeat myself after it's been documented extensively in the case,
Yeah.
you guys can do better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Very pertinent. And in terms of, I guess, when you guys have inherited an existing Salesforce org and you've logged in, is there sort of, I guess, patterns or themes you've noticed when you've sort of taken on as an org that's already stood up in terms of could be poor practice or something that you notice that you think people should be more wary of in their work?
I think the idea of just adding a checkbox, usually it's a mishmash and a Frankenstein. You could just very quickly, I mean, first place to look at a lead or an opportunity page
Mm-hmm.
and see how many things are jammed onto that page. It's
Yep.
usually that's within the first 2 minutes, you could
Yep.
get an idea if you're inheriting a hodgepodge
Yeah.
or if there's been intentional design.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
Using a product such as Elements Cloud
Yep.
or Cloudingo, or I'm sure there are plenty of others, you could quickly run an analysis out of all the standard and custom fields on an object, what percentage of them are populated. So you could very
Ah,
quickly just get a
right.
sense of,
Interesting.
hey, out of all these fields, are people using them? And if they're
Yeah,
not
okay.
using them, are they on the layout? So my quick tip would be, so just look at the layout. Just
Yeah.
as a user, does it look cluttered and intimidating? And
Yeah.
are people actually using the fields? So, tip, dynamic forms,
Mm. So
validation
you're
rules.
all in on dynamic. You love it.
Absolutely. Screen flows,
Yeah. Do you,
just
from a UI sort of bias, I'm getting more and more into screen flows as almost a preferred way of sort of data entry instead of just this never-ending scrolling page of 1,000 fields. I think, and it saves these big clunky validation rules. Can you just guide them through a dynamic process of, okay, you're entering this, then I want this and this, and the flow does it so much more gracefully, I find, than just this big
so
wall of
much more
1,000
gracefully.
fields. And it's so much easier to train, so much easier to teach, so much easier for people to come in without learning
And
things in a hurry.
absolutely. And we said earlier that there are certain things that flows start to reach their limits when we're talking about huge volumes of transactions or data.
Yeah,
But again, uh, you can have the structure of the framework live within a flow and start to replace some of the heavy lifting with an invocable apex.
mm,
And because ultimately, one of the best parts about flow is that you could have admins make changes and maintain and update
yeah,
the vast majority of the logic or the functionality that needs to be updated,
yeah,
and be a lot more sparing of when you need to call on a full-fledged pro
yeah,
code developer to
yeah,
bang out new lines.
yeah. Perfect. Totally agree. Um, how many hours a week do you think you're working on average? Are you happy with that, or are you trying to pull things back? What's a week look like in terms of hours?
I would like to pull back. It's probably on the range of 60 or so. And I'd say the reason for that is
Hmm.
because, and I am going to plug my company for a
We'll get
second.
there. Definitely, we'll get there at the end as well.
So
But
my
yeah, go for it.
firm, Acoustic Selling, you
Yep.
could find us at acousticselling.com. We are focused on startup and young growth companies. And while there are literally thousands of well qualified, excellent Salesforce consultants out there, what we pride ourselves on
Mhm.
is delivering quickly, fastly, or quickly, inexpensively, with high quality. And the way that we could hit all three is by combining products and services.
Okay.
So what I mean by that, and the reason why I'm working so much, is a lot of the configurations and customizations that we find ourselves making time and time again, we've
Hmm.
now bundled into unlocked packages. So
Oh, so you can just boom, put that straight in and you
we could just put it straight in,
customize accordingly. Yeah.
tailor it as we need to, and then again
Yeah.
spend the time diving into biz requirements, analytics needs, so you
Mm.
get the benefit of a prepackaged software plus someone to talk to and guide
Yeah. Right.
through.
So it's like you've got a full-time client job, and then you're also building these assets, I guess, outside of hours, which should make the client work quicker and easier going forward.
Exactly. So once all these are packaged and ready to go and
Yeah.
installable and self-serve, then things will
Yep.
start to scale back.
Oh, that's great. And what's a perfect day for you? You want the door locked, tapping away at the keyboard, or on the client, on the phone, out and about? Where do you thrive for? A bit of everything.
As a salesperson, I sometimes there are times. So it's two part. The first part of the day would be that aha breakthrough moment of solving something technically complex.
Yep.
But then seeing the look on customers' faces when they now see what their world is like now as a result of it. One of the more recent one, and this wasn't super. I put this somewhere in the mid scale. Company has leads. The leads are in a variety of different categories. Depending on the lead, we'll go to a different round robin queue, and giving them a very simple interface to add or remove salespeople from the queue, because again, they're always updating, and just a nice clean interface to do it, very intuitive. They didn't need any training because the way that they're doing before was just a whole rigmarole. And that was just incredibly exciting. Like, oh my gosh, you just gave me hours back in my day or in my week. That sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And super quick, in terms of, I guess, AI, how long do you think until our day-to-day life is like, in terms of CRM and, Salesforce? Do you think we're already there in terms of seeing some really big changes to the way we work, or do you think we might be a few years off from like a real notable difference of what work looks like in the CRM world?
I think it's going to happen quickly, and I will plug one other thing on a week from tomorrow, on February 22nd. I will be having hosting, or I will be joining Cloudingo, an app exchange partner that is an expert in data deduplication and other sorts of data cleanup. We are hosting a webinar on Salesforce data quality. And one of the big points that I'll be making is that to take advantage of both flavors of AI, by the way, meaning predictive, using existing data to spot trends to give meaningful insights and predictions, either predictive AI or generative AI, outright creating sales emails or account summaries or marketing information, product recommendations. To use either of those to their potential all requires on quality data in your CRM and connected sources. It doesn't all have to live in Salesforce, but one way or another, Salesforce, for Salesforce to be able to generate these sales and customer-oriented products and artifacts, you need connected, clean, accurate, complete data. Data quality is everything. To me, I believe that is going to be the single biggest gating factor for how quickly a company gets value from generative AI.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Yeah, well, it's all the rage of now. Appreciate that. Well, Kevin, that has been an amazing conversation. I've enjoyed this. I've got so much out of it. Anything else that you'd like to say or leave before we wind up? We're coming up to an hour now. That's gone so quick. But so you've mentioned the website, acousticselling.com. Is that the best way for people to get in touch? Or?
That is. Come visit. Check out our Einstein bot. Come say hi. And thank you for anybody who's made it this far. Thank you for listening to us. And hopefully we'll meet sometime at a Trailblazer DX or
that would be cool.
Dreamforce or somewhere, or online in a Trailblazer group.
Appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time.